Okay, welcome to Happy Feet tonight. We have two wonderful speakers. On the topic of nutrition, I'll introduce them both. Ashley Draviam is a senior clinical dietitian and board certified specialist in oncology nutrition. She has been at Mass General Hospital for over 10 years, working with adults and pediatric patients to provide individual medical nutrition therapy. Ashley has been a part of the Oncology Lifestyle Medicine program at MGH, where she helps patients and survivors incorporate healthy behaviors into their lifestyles. Ashley is certified as a qualified bilingual staff in Spanish, and enjoys connecting with patients and families from all backgrounds to help with nutrition through their oncology journey. And then we also have Carol Sullivan, and she is a registered dietitian as well, with more than 20 years of experience as a certified specialist in oncology nutrition at Mass General Hospital as well. She has a special interest in lifestyle medicine, where she serves as the lead dietitian at the Mass General Hospital Cancer Center Lifestyle Medicine Program, where she offers individual and virtual group visits. The program is offered to patients on the survivorship continuum, incorporating the pillars of lifestyle medicine, which include healthy eating healthfully, being physically active, managing stress, and getting adequate sleep, and having a strong support system. Sounds a lot like what we are working with here. So I will unpin myself, and then I will let you ladies uh, take over. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for that introduction, Jen. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. Thanks for spending your Sunday evening with us. We're really excited to talk about this. Let me just share my screen here. All right. You can see that. So, Carol and I are going to be talking to you tonight about the gut microbiome and cancer. And we gave a similar talk at Mass General Hospital a few months ago, and there was so much interest in this area. It's a really exciting area, still in its infancy, but lots of exciting research and then practical applications that we're going to be sharing with you all today. So we'll talk about what the gut microbiome is and then its role and some of the research related to the gut microbiome and cancer prevention, progression, and treatment. And then Carol will dive into gut microbiome diversity and how our diet can impact our gut microbiome, focusing on things like fiber and omega-3s and other areas where she'll share some kind of practical applications and tips that you can take away to implement in your lives. All right, so what is the gut microbiome? The definition is a community of microorganisms, including bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microbes that live in the digestive tract, mainly in the intestines. And these microbes help with various processes throughout our body, including digesting food, especially fiber, which we'll talk a lot about, producing important vitamins like B vitamins and vitamin K. They also can protect against harmful bacteria, maintaining that important balance in the gut microbiome. And we talk a lot about the gut microbiome, those microorganisms, but it's also really important to know that those microorganisms produce compounds or metabolites that are beneficial as well, like short chain fatty acids. You'll hear us talking about those a lot. Butyrate is one of the most beneficial, and other metabolites. And the cool thing about these metabolites is they're kind of like the messengers for the gut microbiome. So they can go into the rest of the body and communicate with other systems in the body. And we're learning so much more about how this happens, but it's a really cool kind of means of communication between the systems in the body. So these bugs and their metabolites throughout the body can impact inflammation, immune function, our blood sugar control, hunger, mood, metabolism, and many other things. We love this little image here just because it's kind of a funny way of showing how the gut bacteria does communicate with other systems like the immune system. You know, we have this little bug saying, we've got a situation, incoming rotavirus, and the immune cell on the phone on the other line is communicating. So just a neat way to show how they work together. There is so much research going on in this area, but one thing that's important to know as background is what dysbiosis is. So that's an imbalance in the microbiome or the collection of microorganisms living in a specific part of the body, mostly the gut. It can be caused, this dysbiosis or imbalance, by a variety of factors, including diet is a huge one. Antibiotics can wipe out certain strains of bacteria and infection. And this dysbiosis can result in the growth and invasion of pathogenic or disease causing species. We aren't going to talk a lot about specific strains because what we care about more is the ultimate health impacts of our gut microbiome. So less about, specifics and more about the balance and the diversity. And Carol will get into that more later. So let's get into gut microbiome and cancer. I'm going to be presenting some of the research here, trying to summarize some of the latest research. And as I mentioned, this research is in its infancy. It's very new, but it is exploding. We looked at how many research studies had been published in the last 5 years related to cancer in the gut microbiome, and it was over 2,000. And that number is just growing. And so we suspect that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to really understand how this all works, this complicated and intricate process and communication, and how it's associated with cancer. But the theory is that dysbiosis, or that alteration in the normal kind of balance of gut bacteria in the gut, can lead to inflammation in the body that increases cancer risk. We know that chronic inflammation in a certain part of the body increases the chance that normal cells can have their DNA altered and become cancerous. But on the flip side, we know that there's something positive that we can do about that a healthy gut microbiome can be preventative against cancer. So that's kind of really what we want to be focusing on. Breast cancer, the most common cancer for women worldwide. There's a lot of research on breast cancer and the gut microbiome. This specifically study kind of just talks about the association between the gut microbiome and breast cancer. The gut microbiota can affect breast cancer development through a variety of different mechanisms, including modulating the immune system, the alteration of estrogen levels, and the production of those bacterial metabolites or byproducts that can affect the tumor cells and the tumor microenvironment, but also can actually affect um, the area where the cancer is and the gut in a similar way. So I said we're not going to talk about too many specific strains. I just want to point out, though, here with specific bacteria at the bottom with estrogen receptor positive and HER2 positive breast cancer, that an increased abundance of specific strains are associated with an increased risk of progression, while more of different strains are associated with a decreased risk of progression, so are protective. So it just shows that there's this strong association between the gut microbiome and breast cancer. Colon cancer, third most common cancer. So again, a big one, and really impacted by dietary habits. It makes sense. All the food that we eat ends up going through the colon and impacting those cells there. And we know from population-based or population-wide studies in humans that increased consumption of red and processed meats is associated or correlated with an increased risk for colorectal cancer. So this study is looking at comparing a meat-based diet to a pesca-vegetarian diet, so vegetarian plus fish. And what the researchers did is they used germ-free rats. That means they have no gut bacteria. They're basically a clean slate, wiped free of any gut bacteria. And they gave them fecal transplants. So they transplanted feces with the bacteria from rats fed either this pesca-vegetarian diet or the meat-based diet. And what they found was that the rats who were given the meat-based diet bacteria through the fecal transplant developed more early signs of colon cancer. And on the flip side, the rats given the pesca-vegetarian diet were more protected. So this is a really cool study. It's in rats, but it gives us the opportunity to understand what's happening a little bit and then again down the road to do these studies in humans. But what it shows is that the gut bacteria that is shaped by the diet that these animals were eating can cause or prevent colon cancer. Now, cancer progression, of course, is really important as well. This study looked at patients with MGUS or SMM, smoldering multiple myeloma. MGUS is a benign condition that is classified by M proteins, which is an abnormal protein, and it is considered precancerous. So it can develop into cancer or multiple myeloma down the road. So, of course, if we can prevent that progression from happening, that would be huge. So, in this study, participants followed a 12-week plant-based meal plan. They were provided 2 meals a day plus nutrition education. And understandably, as they expected, participants did increase their intake of unprocessed plant foods, but really significantly from 20 to 92% during this 12-week period. And what they found is that an increased diversity and increased abundance of these butyrate producing bacteria, so the bacteria that produce this really beneficial metabolite, it's really beneficial for gut health. There was an increase in those type of bacteria, also an increase in anti-inflammatory immune cells, decreased markers of inflammation, and then significant weight loss. So this was a small study. So there were two patients whose BMI dropped significantly, 13 and 19% respectively, who saw an improvement in their M protein levels. So remember, that's that marker of progression. And it's a small study again, that's a really small number, but it's really, really cool to see that that change really actually impacted that transition and that marker of progression. Conclusion here, a high fiber plant-based diet may delay or prevent progression from MGUS or SMM to multiple myeloma. And then based on the really promising results from this small trial, they're enrolling for a larger trial, the Nutrivention 3 trial now, looking at a plant-based diet with or without supplements like omega-3s and curcumin on the progression from MGUS to multiple myeloma. Melanoma is another one that's being studied often in this realm because one of the most common treatments for melanoma is immunotherapy. Many of you may be familiar with immunotherapy, but just kind of in brief, it's basically a treatment that's helping boost our own immune system to help fight the cancer. And since we have talked about the immune system and the gut microbiome are really intricately related, anything we can do to help boost our immune system may help improve the effectiveness of this treatment. So in the first study in 2017, researchers looked at the gut and mouth bacteria of melanoma patients on immunotherapy and found that patients who responded well to treatment had different and more diverse gut bacteria compared to those who didn't respond. And also responders' gut microbiome profiles were linked to stronger immune responses. And then even in germ-free mice, so those clean slate mice that received gut bacteria transplanted from responders showed improved anti-tumor immunity. So this really shows how gut bacteria may significantly impact a patient's response to treatment with this type of treatment, with this immunotherapy. And so in a follow-up study in 2021, researchers looked at patients who ate a higher fiber diet. This was considered greater than 20 grams. And Carol's going to talk later about kind of how we get to that number or higher. And patients who interestingly avoided probiotic supplements were found to have better outcomes on immunotherapy. And the really cool thing about this study was they found that for every extra 5 grams of fiber that participants ate per day, they had a 30% lower risk of cancer progression or death. And the really neat thing about that is a small, tangible thing that we can work on to have a really big impact on outcomes. They also found that a higher fiber intake was also linked to longer progression free survival. So, basically, conclusion, a higher fiber diet may be protective against cancer. We also want to talk about chemotherapy, another primary treatment type. And of course, if we can impact the effectiveness or the tolerance of any of these treatments, that's an area that we would want to target. We've learned that the bacteria in your gut can influence how well chemotherapy works. This specific harmful gut bacteria has been shown to help cancer cells resist chemotherapy, while this Akkermansia muciniphila, good bacteria, has been shown to improve chemotherapy response. And again, this is in mice, but it gives us the groundwork to start doing more of these research studies, and they are being done in humans now, so we can actually find ways to really implement this in real life. Those beneficial metabolites, the byproducts like the short chain fatty acids again, and this UDCA can also improve chemotherapy results. So again, it's not just about the bacteria, but also about their byproducts. And then tolerance, of course, really important. We want patients to be able to get their full dose, their full course of treatment to have the best outcomes. And so we've seen that gut bacteria and their metabolites can reduce the harmful side effects of chemotherapy, like mouth sores or mucositis, for example. Some strains help to lower inflammation and improve gut health, which can make chemotherapy side effects, particularly some of those GI side effects, which are quite prevalent with many chemotherapies, that they can make those side effects less severe. And in mice, this selenium supplement and this B. longum bacteria helped with symptoms such as weight loss and diarrhea. So again, two common side effects from chemotherapy. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol to talk about gut microbiome diversity and how we can impact that, and some practical applications and tips that you can take home to help improve health and impact cancer risk, progression, and outcomes.
Thank you, Ashley. So helpful to have all of the research to kind of bolster what we actually end up recommending, right? It's really powerful to understand that we are starting to have some of this research. I think looking at the supplement aisle at stores, you would think that we already know all of this, but we really don't know that much at all. So I'm going to start with talking about just some of the definitions, and Ashley did a beautiful job talking about each of these prebiotic, probiotic, postbiotics, but I just want to define kind of these three separate areas just to think about the application of what Ashley's just talked about and how we actually improve our gut microbiome with food and making sure we're getting the right nutrients. So, what is the difference between these three biotics? Prebiotics are the food that feeds the beneficial bacteria that live in our gut. You have to have healthy, to have a healthy gut microbiome, you have to feed the bugs. So the first part is the prebiotics, and the food that we are feeding the probiotics is the prebiotics. The probiotics are the actual bugs themselves, the live organisms that confer a health benefit to the host. The third area, which is a newer word for most people, I think, is postbiotics. And postbiotics really are the production of the beneficial compounds that Ashley mentioned, these short chain fatty acids, mainly this one called butyrate. Postbiotics also are actually considered some of the dead microorganisms that might end up in the food that we're eating and even in supplements. And there is research ongoing looking at some of those types of postbiotics and that they might actually still confer a health benefit. So there are these three areas to think about and to help organize in your mind what we're talking about. Okay, go to the next one, Ash. Ashley, thank you. The next thing that I want to talk about is the fiber. So this is the prebiotics, right? So fiber is what our gut bugs are actually eating for food. So fiber is defined as a type of carbohydrate found in plants that our bodies can't digest. And the purpose of this slide is understanding that there are multiple types of fiber, and all of the types of fiber in our food have benefits. So the third one, all the way on the right, the prebiotic fiber, that specifically is feeding these gut bugs. And there is prebiotic fiber mixed into a lot of the different foods that we are eating. But if you were to just look up prebiotic fiber on the internet, you would get some very specific recommendations. But the truth is there is little bits of prebiotic fiber in a lot more of the foods that we're eating. But just to give you a flavor of what some of the other types of fiber does is soluble fiber, for example. If you think about oats or when you mash a banana, this is water soluble fiber. This type of fiber absorbs water and creates a gel in our GI tract, which can help lower cholesterol, keep blood sugar low, and help us feel full. This type of fiber also is really helpful from a nutrition counseling perspective when we're talking to people who are having a lot of diarrhea. The next type of fiber is insoluble fiber. This is the fiber that doesn't absorb any water, and water just rolls right off of it. If we think about most of our vegetables, the skins of fruits, that's this type of fiber. This type of fiber is important because it adds bulk to our stool and helps promote regular bowel movements. And then this third type of fiber that we just defined on the previous slide is the prebiotic fiber. And this really is one of the primary foods for the good gut bugs. Go ahead, Ash, and go to the next one. So what does 25 to 30 grams of fiber? This is the actual recommendation from many different organizations that we know helps with the prevention of chronic disease, but this is also the amount of fiber that is probably most beneficial for feeding our gut bugs. So just this isn't an exhaustive list, but just to give you an example as to where we might be getting a lot of our fiber, the first few foods on here are lentils, beans, and split peas, all more than 10, 12 grams of fiber per cup. Avocado makes it with 10 grams of fiber for one medium, raspberries, pears, apples, also 4 or 5 grams of fiber, broccoli. So all of our plant foods are going to offer us some fiber. Does anybody happen to know how much fiber the average amount of fiber that an American eats? Anyone happen to know? It's actually 15 grams of fiber. So that's why the study that Ashley mentioned, where 20 grams of fiber was considered high, is actually above what most Americans eat. But it's not actually the amount that we would want people to get. 20 is still kind of considered a little bit on the low side. So definitely something to look into this week when you're eating, just taking a peek at maybe how much fiber you're eating in a day. Go ahead. So this is another study showing us that, again, this research is really in its infancy. And what they did with this study was they actually took patients, adults with a history of colorectal cancer or high-risk precancerous polyps, and the intervention was getting these patients, counseling them to consume 1 cup of canned pressure-cooked white navy beans for 8 weeks. The control group, so the intervention group, was compared to this control group where participants just maintained their regular diet without adding any beans. And they collected stool and fasting blood samples every 4 weeks to evaluate their gut microbiome changes. And they did find increases in beneficial bacteria in the bean consuming group. They also saw reductions in pro-inflammatory markers and improved immune regulation in the group that was eating the beans. The positive effect of eating the beans stopped after they stopped eating the beans, emphasizing the need for consistent diet habits. No serious side effects were reported. However, as you can imagine, some participants experienced an aversion to eating 1 cup of beans every day. It can get think a lot of us can eat the same thing every day and a lot of people cannot. So I think that got tiresome. The bottom line here is that incorporating navy beans into the daily diet of colorectal cancer survivors may enhance the gut microbiome diversity, regulate immune and inflammatory processes, and consistent consumption of really any bean might be key to maintaining these benefits. We love this cartoon, really demonstrating how we get some good gut microbiome diversity, where you see the little guy on the left is eating his pepperoni pizza. Nothing wrong with the occasional pepperoni pizza. However, the guys on the right, you can see there are many different types of these are supposed to be gut bugs, many different types of gut bugs, and they're eating lots of different types of plant foods. So there's nuts, there's grains, there's fruit, there's veggies, there's legumes, there's seeds. They're getting a lot of fiber and a lot of different types of fiber. So there is evidence as well that eating 30 different plant foods in a week can increase your gut microbiome diversity. So the key takeaways so far are aiming for 25 grams of fiber and then trying to up the variety of plant foods in a week. So this can be a fun exercise to try to get to this 30 per week. Another practical application that I didn't mention about the fiber is if you take a look at your diet and you realize you're not eating that much fiber, trying to go up in your fiber intake slowly is beneficial, because if you're going from 15 grams of fiber to 30, you can definitely end up with some unwanted GI side effects. So just being careful about how quickly you increase your fiber intake. So another tip on thinking about how to add more plants, if you take maybe the one vegetable you might have at dinner time, and instead of just having the one vegetable like this pan of roasted broccoli, you can think about how might I make this into a dish that includes more plants. You of course could just throw a bunch of different vegetables on a roasting sheet and get multiple different plants, or you could turn your broccoli into this like broccoli slaw that has broccoli and carrots and some kale and almonds. Um, and maybe there's like a little bit of garlic and onion in there too. So maybe instead of just the one vegetable, you end up with 5 or 6. And something like a broccoli slaw takes a while to make, or a little bit more effort to make, but then kind of gets better as it sits in the fridge over the course of a few days too. So good option. The next thing that might help with gut microbiome diversity is fermented foods. So this comes out of a study where they took patients who weren't really eating fermented foods and they had them ramp up their fiber from 20 grams to 45, which is pretty high. And then they also had them ramp up their fermented food intake, and they found that a diet rich in diverse fermented foods, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide, increased their gut microbiome diversity and decreased these inflammatory markers as well. So the fermented foods are yogurt and kefir, which tend to be pretty well tolerated. Yogurt is, of course, a pretty popular food, and a serving would be considered 6 to 8 ounces. So just getting one serving of these foods in a day might be beneficial. Kefir has a lot more strains of probiotics in it, and it tends to have a little bit more tart of a flavor profile. And then things like kimchi and sauerkraut, kombucha, all can taste a little bit different, especially kimchi and sauerkraut, depending on how it's made. The flavor profile can be pretty different from one version to the next. And I usually recommend, if you're going to start trying these foods, to just try a bite. It is definitely an acquired taste, just like coffee and tea and some of the other things that we eat. So just getting your palate used to eating these foods can be worth it in the end for that gut microbiome diversity. Miso, I think, can be a little easier to add to like a salad dressing, and that can, and or to a soup. Those are easy ways to add miso in. Um, so thinking about adding little doses of these foods can definitely help with gut microbiome diversity as well. These microbes from the fermented foods don't colonize in your gut long term, but still have beneficial effects if you're consuming them consistently. So here, we're just talking about fermented foods and the prebiotics. So, prebiotics, of course, are feeding these beneficial microbes. So, the idea here is to combine fermented foods with a high fiber diet, which leads to more diversity and more of those postbiotics, these short chain fatty acids that have all of the benefits that we're looking for to decrease inflammation. So pairing the fermented foods with things like garlic, onion, banana, Jerusalem artichokes, soybeans, asparagus, wheat, and whole grain products. Those are kind of the foods that have the highest known amounts of prebiotics. And then just a word of caution to consider individual tolerance. For a lot of people, garlic and onions don't work well, and like greener, less ripe bananas don't work great for people with IBS in some cases. So, just a word of caution. And then for some of the products, especially kefir, if you were going to start experimenting with different brands of kefir, just watching out for the added sugar. Over here on the right, we have a nutrition facts label, and this particular brand of plain kefir doesn't have any added sugar. And then you can see underneath it in the ingredients, no added sugar. And then the number of probiotic cultures are listed from this kefir too, which is pretty impressive. Just the number of different strains. Yeah. Great, Ash. Thanks. Probiotics. So this is a word of caution on probiotic supplements and cancer. The first word of caution is that probiotic supplements may pose a risk of infection in people who are immunocompromised, including those undergoing certain treatments. So, always making sure that you're checking in with your team if you're planning or thinking about starting a probiotic supplement, and really any supplement for that matter. The second concern is that probiotics may blunt the effectiveness of chemotherapy, also known as checkpoint inhibitors, which Ashley spoke about in one of the studies that she reviewed. So, this is a callback to the melanoma study that she talked about, where patients who ate more fiber and avoided probiotic supplements actually had better outcomes. The third, which isn't really a concern, it's more just a FYI, probiotic supplements don't increase gut microbiome diversity in healthy people. So if um, you don't currently have any active issues, you feel like your gut is pretty healthy, adding a probiotic on top of that isn't probably doing anything for you. So not really a concern, just an FYI. So the recommendation here is to avoid self-prescribed probiotics, especially during immunotherapy, and really focusing on diet-based microbial support. So here we have a couple of others. So a couple of other nutrients that might be helpful for gut health, including vitamin D. Here we are in New England, moving into darker days. Vitamin D being the sunshine vitamin and being really important, as it turns out, for gut barrier integrity. So the junctions of your intestinal tract are really important that they hold tightly together, and vitamin D helps to make sure that is happening. Vitamin D helps the immune system work properly and lowers inflammation, and high vitamin D levels are associated with increased levels of beneficial bacteria species and lower levels of pathogenic bacteria. So a good reason to possibly get your vitamin D levels checked and make sure that you're taking a supplement if you need one. The Endocrine Society does actually support taking 1,500 to 2,000 international units of vitamin D for all adults. You can get vitamin D from food, but it's hard to get that recommended minimum, even of 1,000 IUs per day. So salmon, tuna, dairy, milk substitutes, egg yolks have some, but it's not really that much. So supplement here is, we do usually recommend vitamin D supplements, especially if we know your blood levels. The next one is polyphenols. I think this is really cool because it, again, is encouraging us to eat more plants. So polyphenols are substances that are found in plants that give some flowers, fruits, and vegetables specific colors. And polyphenols have some strong antioxidant activity. And what's cool about these are that they are poorly absorbed in the small intestine and actually reach the colon, where they serve again as food for the gut bacteria, boosting populations of some of the beneficial bacteria that we want there. They end up being able to suppress pathogenic bacteria, enhance the production of the beneficial metabolites or postbiotics. They may also strengthen the gut barrier and reduce inflammation. There are many, many foods that are high in polyphenols. This is just a really short list. So, and then just a additional recommendation that the American Institute for Cancer Research does recommend 5 cups a day of fruits and vegetables. So that would help you to get in these polyphenols as well. The last one is omega-3 fatty acids. I think it's safe to say Ashley and I really love omega-3 fatty acids from food. They just have such strong anti-inflammatory properties. But the omega-3s have also been shown to boost populations of beneficial bacteria, which I definitely learned when we were researching, putting together this presentation, which one more like positive for omega-3s from the dietitians. So food sources here are fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel, and then the plant sources, which we can more reliably get into our diet, are from ground flaxseed, chia seeds, walnuts. And this time of year, I feel like it's even easier to be adding more flaxseed, chia seeds, walnuts. I feel like I'm making more oatmeal. I'm making more, I have a couple muffin recipes that I really like, and I end up just throwing flaxseed into those. And then easy to put on top of salad and even cooked vegetables. Ground flaxseed and chia seed you can easily add to things like that as well, and walnuts actually. Hemp hearts also aren't on here. Those are another one that I really like that are high in magnesium too. So lots of different sources of omega-3s from fish and then also plant foods. So, what might negatively impact the gut microbiome that we might want to think about limiting or avoiding? Alcohol, for sure, can cause some dysbiosis, especially when consumed in excess. Saturated fat, so this is the fat that is in butter and animal meats. Red meat specifically has been shown to cause some gut microbiome disruption. This is a callback to Ashley's study that she talked about when the germ-free mice were getting either the vegetarian diet or the uh, animal-based diet. Ultra processed foods, we know, when consumed chronically and in too big of a proportion, can cause disruption, mostly because you're not getting enough fiber. And then a low fiber diet also can cause disruption to the gut microbiome. And then interestingly, there are 3 non-nutritive sweeteners or artificial sweeteners that might cause gut microbiome disruptions too. And those are sucralose, saccharin, and ACE-K. So these are the things to try to have less of or limit. Hopefully we gave you lots of ideas for what to add. And our key takeaways and bottom lines are that the gut microbiome, including the microbes, as well as the metabolites, those postbiotics, are really intricately linked with cancer development, progression, and treatment outcomes. And there is potential to use the gut microbiome as a target for cancer prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. However, the research is really in its infancy and too new to develop any precision treatment options based on specific microbes or even patterns of these bugs. The bottom line here is that the gut microbiome influences cancer in complicated ways, and everyone's gut microbiome is different. And we don't know yet what an ideal microbiome is to positively impact cancer or even overall health. We're getting a better idea, but we definitely don't have clear answers yet. We know that eating more fiber, increasing the number of plant foods that you eat over the course of the week, and eating fermented foods can increase the diversity of your gut microbiome, and positively impact overall health in that way. I think that's all we have. We'd love to take questions if people have them.